now, so there we go.
Mine's 9:00, so
Okay,
our
and we're live.
darn, we're okay now, Carl?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, then, good morning, everyone, and good that you're with us this morning for the meeting. Thank you for the opportunity I had to speak with each of you over the last week or so. I want to say a special thank you to Angela and the staff for the way they've adapted to working and giving all sorts of efforts and getting accomplishments during this pandemic. I think it's been great. Angela and I spoke, and she was going to give an update on how they're doing and where we are. And I was really pleased to read through and see the information in 6A, and I'm looking forward to that discussion, and I know you will be too. The report I felt was excellent. So thank you for that, Angela, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. As I discussed with each of you, I'll be suggesting that we have our September meeting in person at South Nation, following all of the rules. And in talking with each of you, generally speaking, all are believing that it's the right time to try it. Whether well, I think it's the right time to try it for a whole lot of reasons. There's a worry about an upsurge later in the fall, and I think it would be good to have this meeting to see how things go and then make decisions from there as we go forward. So that's the direction we're going. It would be just the board and Angela and probably Diane and maybe Linda, and the group would be small. It would be well spread out. We would be following all the rules that have been set up and that you know and that you'll be reviewing as Angela talks about her input in a few minutes. Other than that, the September meeting also would, if we can do in person, would cover the annual meeting and would complete the business we have from that, and specifically dealing with confirming the executive. So those are my quick comments on where we're going and what we're doing. In September, we will start as well, working with Levy and working with budget presentations. Okay, who did we just get?
Mr.
I
Chair,
just
that's
dialed
Jerry
Jerry
Kemp.
into the call. He was having trouble with the Teams client.
Okay, all right then. So that's the that's my quick update. Is there any comment or question?
If you are satisfied with your message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3. To continue recording where you left off, press 4.
Jerry, I think you may have two lines open.
Mr. Chair?
Are you
Yes.
still there? If you are satisfied with your message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record.
Carl, are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, I just removed member counts from the call, and I'll add him back in.
Okay, because there was something funny happening in mine asking about confirming something, and I didn't know what the heck that was. All right, we're looking for.
Oh, Mr. Chair, if
Yes.
maybe this isn't the time now, or maybe it is, I'll bring it up. The September meeting, if we're going to meet in person, can we still live stream the meeting? Will staff give us an update farther on in that in the meeting?
I think the answer is yes, and yes, you'll get an update.
Okay, thank you.
So you won't let us forget that, I know, as we move forward. Is there any other general questions before I move to number 2?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Daniel Lafleur. I'd like to also mention, I do thank the staff, because I had a few meetings with the staff in the last month, and I thank you so much for all the information you gave us at our for our municipality. Very appreciated. I thank you so much.
And well said, Danielle. All right, just a quick check. Is Michael the only one that's not on at the moment?
I believe so, and Matt Luloff, who sent roots.
Yeah, well, yes, Matt won't be on. So we do have Jerry now?
Yes, Jerry's here.
Okay, good. Then
Michael, I just heard Michael as well, Mr. Chair.
Yep, that's correct. I'm here, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so we're at number 2, and we've completed the chair's remarks, and we're ready to move forward. Now, the approval of the SNC Board of Directors main and supplemental agendas. And you may have heard that there was a brief discussion earlier at our in-camera session. We will add an extra item to be discussed that will be done in confidence. So looking now for a motion of approval. And I think that I see Doug and George moving direction of moving forward.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Chair, just for the record, I want to put on the record on the recording that the second matter that we're adding is a second property. So it's a property matter that we're discussing in closed session. Just for the members of the public to know, it's property acquisition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, appreciate that. All right. Is there any discussion further? Are there any objectors? We've approved the agenda with the addition of the in-camera item. Declaration of conflict of interest. Does anyone have a declaration to make at this stage? Hearing none. Moving on. Number 4, the project update, PowerPoint. Staffers.
Good morning, board members. This is just an update on the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference, which was held this week virtually. Some of you may have participated. It's one that we attend every year. This was my first opportunity to attend a virtual conference. It was very interesting. They had a virtual lobby, as you can see in the photo there, some pre-recorded sessions, some live streams. The ministers were speaking. It was actually quite enjoyable. You could have it on while you were doing other things on the computer. There are other conferences that are going to be held in this format, including the Municipal East Conference and some professional conferences. Some of us will be speaking at some of these conferences virtually this year. So less travel and still getting some quality content. So it's nice to see these things moving forward in a different format.
Thanks, Allison. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they want to add at this stage? Hearing none. Moving on.
Good morning, members of the board. This is a program update. You might recall at our last meeting, we discussed new guidelines for our community environmental grants program. We amended the criteria to support community tree planting events this fall and the creation and support for community gardens. So we're pretty excited that these guidelines are being picked up by our community groups. We've got lots of applications in the queue, and we're really looking forward to reviewing them at our next committee meeting. So we've set a tentative deadline of August 31st. We're hoping to plant as many trees as we can. Those are larger trees in our communities, whether they be parks, fire halls, local green spaces, just to help spruce up our neighborhoods this fall. So really looking forward to the amendment, really looking forward to getting some shovels in the ground. And I think it's a really great example of a COVID-19 adaptation to our program that works really well. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any questions or comments? If any of you wish to tune in to any of these committee meetings, of course, you can always do that, and they're planned as per the schedule and stipulated. Moving on, I think it's Rhonda.
Just before, it's Doug here. Before I go ahead, I just want to thank John for this program. He's been reaching out to different groups, and the Greeley Community Association is going to partake in this program because John reached out.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Speaking of tree planting, we're continuing to work with our First Nation and industry partners to deliver a reconciliation and climate change tree planting event on September 23rd. The Healing Places will be the name of the site. It's located on SNC 164, which is near Shanley. It's a recently acquired property in Edwardsburg Cardinal. The photo on the slide shows you the site layout, and it depicts the medicine wheel. For those that may not be familiar with the medicine wheel, it represents many things to many First Nation cultures, including the 4 pillars of life: mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical connections, the 4 cardinal directions, and the 4 elements: water, wind, fire, and earth. Culturally significant trees will be planted throughout the site. The green dots that you see within the photo, for example, the 7 around the inner circle represent the grandfather teachings, and the 13 trees on the outer circle represent the grandmother teachings, including the 13 moons. In the center of the circle, there are future plans for a raised herb bed for medicinal plants. So this event will follow COVID restrictions as far as gathering numbers and safety precautions. We will be circulating an invitation to the board members shortly, and there will be a pre-registration requirement for the event.
What will be the maximum you're going to suggest be there, Rhonda?
So according to our current health unit guidelines, there is a maximum number of 100 participants for outdoor gatherings, and that would include staff.
Any further questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I was just curious, a wonderful project. What was the total cost of the project?
We're still working on it, and we have a lot of in-kind contribution coming from our various partners. So we're at around 10 to 15,000 cash coming from a number of participants, and probably double that in in-kind contributions.
Okay, perfect. If ever we wanted to replicate it somewhere, I just was curious. Thanks.
Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much, Rhonda. And you watch for the invites to come out and decide whether or not you can be a part of it. Is it Allison now?
Yes, I'll be presenting this slide for Jeff today. In this situation, the landowner is looking to replace what is a private dam/weir on his property. And you can see in the second photo, there's this sort of a T-bar shape. That's where this reservoir flows through in and then hits this dam and flows over. In this case, he's creating a very beautiful property in Clarence Rockland and looking to make some improvements. What's interesting is with all the permits we review, we rarely have to interact with the Lakes and Rivers the Lakes and Rivers Act approvals. And in this case, Jeff kind of concierged the landowner, helped them find out if their project required this approval, confirmed that it did, then walked him through the application process. And I think this is a great example of the role South Nation plays in the environmental approval sphere, bigger than our office. Development becomes more and more complex. That's what we're seeing as a trend. And I think South Nation does a great job helping people navigate through some of these difficult and complicated systems. So in this situation, the gentleman's been a pleasure to work with, and we're excited to see what his project looks like when he's all done.
Questions? Hearing none, thank you, Allison. Moving on to Allison.
This one, we wanted to make a little tongue-in-cheek comment. We had 3 DFO staff on site in Castleman, and we called it sort of a rare sighting. It's been a while since we've had DFO staff present on site with us doing work together, but it's really nice to see them taking an interest, coming out to see the work that they're reviewing and get to know the area. And I think Brent had a great time speaking with them about the reviews and how they do them. This was an opportunity again for us in the approvals department to find ways that we can help people through complicated approvals processes. So in this situation, there's a number of applicants in the same area doing a shoreline erosion protection, and it did trigger a DFO review, and Brent and Michelle and Jeff have been working with the landowners to not only get them some grants, help them make their project a little more environmentally friendly, but also get them through what is actually quite a complicated process. So we're happy to see these staff on site and happy to have the opportunity to network with them a little bit.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you, Allison. Moving on to Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. So this is our 6th year of sampling unrated municipal drains with funding from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So these are drains that have no fish or flow information associated with them. And we partnered with our municipal drainage superintendents to determine priority drains to sample in 2020. And their help is invaluable to the success of the sampling. And we'd really like to mention how helpful this year Eric LaRue has been on this work. He's the drainage superintendent for most municipalities in Prescott-Russell, and that's him and his son in the top of the photo. He facilitated contact with the landowners and made sure we were able to access all the locations we needed to complete our work. So he's been a fantastic partner every time that we've worked with him. And this sampling is important for him and the municipalities as well, because it means that the data we collect can be used by Fisheries and Oceans to assign a class to the drain, so that any maintenance work on the drain would then follow a streamlined class authorization, approval process. So he then has certainty on timelines and requirements from Fisheries and Oceans, and he can proceed with his work in a timely manner. When a drain doesn't have a class assigned to it, Fisheries and Oceans has to do a site-specific review, and this can be very lengthy and may delay planned work and timelines. So we have a few more drains planned to sample this year, and we're waiting to hear also from Fisheries and Oceans if there's additional funding available to complete even more. Thank you.
Michelle, are all these in Prescott Russell?
This year, the majority of them are in Prescott Russell, but we also have a couple in City of Ottawa.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you, Michelle. Moving on to Allison.
Thank you. As you know, we've been doing a lot of floodplain mapping, erosion hazard mapping within Ottawa and UCPR. This map is showing some of our recent erosion and floodplain hazard mapping in Limoges on the South Indian Creek. In Limoges, there's a lot of development coming forward and planned over the next 20 years. And a lot of it is now starting to sort of bump up against natural features. And where these natural features, such as South Indian Creek, have hazards, it creates a situation where a lot of people have to discuss how to make the development safe. This is an example of where we came in early in the process, met with the landowner, met with the municipality and the county, and started discussing how we could keep the lots out of the hazard and out of the regulation area. And if we do this properly, we can make sure that development proceeds quickly and easily, and that future landowners don't have to interact with any kind of regulations or permitting when they want to add on a deck or a shed or whatnot. So in this situation, based on the excellent mapping we're getting from our GIS, the excellent modeling from our engineering team, we're able to have really quick discussions and say with very good certainty, here's what you're working with. How can we help you make this development safe? We're seeing this more and more. We have about 4 or 5 challenging files on the go right now that involve hazards. And it's excellent to have such a great team in the engineering department supporting the approvals and helping us, make sure that these things work out best for everyone. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Is there any question or comment? Hearing none, thank you, Allison. Moving on to Michelle.
Thank you. So we've been working with the City of Ottawa to study subwatersheds under high development pressures with funding from the Eastern Ontario Water Resources Program. The draft report of our 2-year study on the North Castor River area is complete, and it's with our partners at the City right now for their comments and feedback before it's finalized. The report assesses the environmental health of the catchment. It highlights areas that are in good, fair, or poor condition, and it provides a really great list of recommendations for those areas which may need improvement or future study. One of the features studied for the report was headwater drainage. So this map shows the locations of all the headwater drainage features that were assessed and given a management recommendation based on their characteristics and functions. So the majority of these really small temporary streams actually ranked as high. So the yellow, pink, and green pieces you can see in the pie chart. So they have important functions as sources of food, sediment, nutrients, and flow to downstream aquatic systems. And this information allows SNC and our partners at the City to make well-informed decisions on future development in the area so that the health of the subwatershed is protected for all residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, thank you, Michelle. Moving on to Sandra.
Good morning, board. It's a pleasure to present to you the slide. This is a feature by our GIS department. They are working in erosion hazard. And first, I would like to give you the definition of erosion hazard. It's defined as the loss of land due to human or natural processes that can pose a threat to life and property. So, as Alison mentioned, we work very closely with the planners and the regulations officers. In the past, we had to look at just contours and analyze if the slope was stable or not. Right now, our GIS department has developed tools that they can apply and do it automatically. So our review is very simple. We have been doing reviews lot by lot every time that we have a permitting requires for the Ottawa River. So we are moving forward and we are trying to delineate the full erosion hazard for the Ottawa River, Clarence Creek, and San Lawrence River. So this erosion hazard line is going to be delineated to ensure the safety with regards to life and infrastructure.
Questions of Sandra? Hearing none. Thank you, Sandra. And moving on to Sandra.
This is one of our projects. So we received funding from the Ontario Power Generation to complete the enhancement of the Henry Tweed Park in Russell. So last year, the project started last year, and staff, they noticed some kind of flow coming into in one of the streams at the park. And this flow was causing erosion. It's very high velocity flows, and it's intermittent. So we didn't know from where this flow was coming from, so we started a search of the area, and we found that the Old Town subdivision has a pond. So our review included the survey of the pond. We contacted the municipal staff at the Township of Russell, and they were very happy to assist us because at the same time that we assessed the pond, we helped them to do the inspection and review the status of the pond. So all the survey has been completed, and we are analyzing the data, and we also deploy data logger in different areas because now the township is also wondering if there are any other issues with main water. So we are trying to assist finding out where these high flows velocities are coming.
Questions of Sandra or comments? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Sandra. Moving on to Pat.
Everyone. In the course of our work on our properties, we're always finding new things. We like to keep our properties natural, as the slide shows. The picture is a patch of an invasive plant called Japanese spurge. It's quite common in the landscape industry. We discovered this as part of our work on the OPG partnership, restoring J. Henry Tweed. We've completed the survey of the East Park boundary, and that's where this is located. And we've added this to the work that we'll be doing in terms of restoring the park, and we will be removing this from the park.
Questions of Pat? Pat, to your knowledge, is this extensive throughout our area? Is this new? I saw that you indicated that it has been noted around about, but what's your comment on that?
It's very commonly used in the landscape industry. This is the first time I've found it in one of our properties. J. Henry Tweed, of course, is in a urban environment, and it's probably the only location so far. And it's a very small patch, as you can see.
Thank you very much. Other comments or questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Pat. Moving on to Michelle.
Thank you. So as Pat was mentioning, invasive species, they cause direct and indirect costs to our forests and waterways, and they impact ecosystems, they can impact infrastructure and our communities. So we've been monitoring invasive species in the watershed and carrying out control efforts on our properties. So like Pat mentioned, the one at Tweed will be one of our efforts we will do. Phragmites is another invasive plant species that we've been working hard to remove from our properties, as it's very aggressive and prolific species. Two of the sites we've been monitoring are in the Leitrim wetland just off of the Finley Creek Boardwalk, and the Robert Graham Conservation Area in the location where we did an enhancement through a previous OPG project. Fortunately, the size of the infestations are fairly small because we caught them early through our monitoring, and we've been able to complete some control efforts to eliminate the Phragmites. So we used a herbicide on the individual plants so that we could limit any negative impacts to surrounding native vegetation. But this was especially tricky in the Leitrim wetland as the understory was very dense, which made it hard to access the site and to find all of the Phragmites plants. So in the photo, you can see or barely see one of our staff working in that area and how thick the vegetation is. So we're going to be revisiting the sites again to see how the herbicide worked and to carry out any follow-up control as needed. Thank you.
Questions of Michelle?
Mr. Chair, it's Archie Mellon. When you say you use a chemical, I guess, to try and control it, are you, I guess the farmer coming out of me hitting it with Roundup?
In this case, actually, yes, we did use Roundup. It was it's one of the best ones to use for Phragmites. There's a best management plan that we follow that lays out all the guidelines around which herbicide to use and the timing and the methodology.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? One brief one. Michelle, did the staff identify the Phragmites in the Findlay Boardwalk area, since it seems to be off the boardwalk area, or how was it identified?
In this case, I believe it was actually Fred Schuler who pointed it out to us that he had seen it there. So we did some follow up and initially just took a look at how bad the infestation was, and then planned our control effort from there.
And for you that know Fred, he's very involved in fish and wildlife, and has he and his wife are both involved in all sorts of activities, so he gets around. Thank you. Any further question of Michelle? Thank you, Michelle. Moving on to Pat.
Sorry, I was muted. The slide is about the property in Augusta. We're doing some studies down there before we actually do any construction. We've just completed a habitat assessment, and an archaeological assessment is underway. The parking lot is all laid out and ready to start construction. We will be receiving some in-kind support from the Augusta Township in terms of staffing and equipment.
Questions of Pat? Hearing none, thank you, Pat. Moving on to Sandra to give a quick report.
Yes, so it has been a busy summer for the staff working in the low water response program and the water response team. The lack of precipitation and high temperatures were the culprit of this year's drought. By the middle of July, the watershed was in a level 2 drought. However, conditions have improved during the last week of July and beginning of August. But there is still showers that they are sporadic, and not in all the watershed has received the same precipitation. Currently, the upper South Nation region remains in level 2 low water condition, and the South Nations watersheds have been downgraded to a level 1. So many activities took place to ensure the public was aware and informed, and to promote water conservation. In the picture, we see Omar Cannon. He was interviewed by the CTV News. He did a great job in that interview. Also, our water response team met 3 times, and I will provide the highlights of the meetings during the board report. Our communications team was prepared amazing educational material, and I think Sean will present some of them next.
And I will just add that the last meeting of this group was a week ago today on the 13th, and you will hear more about that when we get our reports or we get our minutes, etc. But it's quite an interesting and thorough group that is together as we discuss the items and make the decisions. Thank you, Sandra. Moving on to John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carl, I'm not sure if you can click that video or if it'll work. But as Sandra mentioned, whenever possible, we do our best to create and support outreach materials for our programs. In this instance, we did produce a short video to help highlight some of the things that we're talking about and support the work of our water response team. So we did take an opportunity to get our drone out, to get some footage of some of the low water conditions that we've seen throughout the watershed, and really use this video to help promote the water conservation tips that we've been talking about and working with our municipalities on. And of course, also to help promote the 2 surveys we produced this year. We did produce a drought observation survey to help people easily get that information to us, to let us know when their wells are going dry, when they see rivers and streams without water. And then also we produced a second survey targeted towards our agricultural producers so that we could get a better idea of the impacts on water supply that they're experiencing, the drought conditions that they're observing, and what those impacts on their yields and on their economic impact. So the video was great. I think our tactics are working quite well. We produced a number of new resources this year, and the feedback from our communities has been good and very useful to support the work of our water response team. Thank you. Of course, this video is on Facebook and YouTube if you wanted to watch it in full.
Questions or comments? Hearing.
Usually do we have the link? Can we have this link sent to us? This is Dana.
Certainly. It was included, I think, in our last water response memo, but we'll share it around as well, Dana.
Did I hear another comment? Hearing no one further, this item item 4 is now completed, and we're going on to item 5. Request for approval, Board of Directors meeting minutes of June 18th, 2020. And of course, we did not meet in July. So this is pages 4 to 4 to 14 of your information sent out. Looking for a motion of approval. And
so moved, Mr. Chair. Michael Brown.
So Michael Brown moved, seconded by Peggy.
Yes.
Okay, 5A, 1, and Peggy. Okay. Then is there any discussion or question? Hearing none, are there any objections to the approval?
Bill, it's Doug Thompson. Before we approve it, should we mention in the minutes the Board of Directors meeting, something about that it was held virtually, just for records, that the members approve the Board of Directors minute meeting of the June 18th meeting 2020 or virtual meeting. I think it would, I mean, it's not a big point of contention, but I think it should be listed there that this meeting was a virtual meeting.
And probably we should, if it isn't noted, we can note as well that April, May, and June were all virtual meetings along with August. So noted.
Okay.
Anything further? Hearing nothing. Any objections to the approval? Hearing none, we have approved the Board of Directors meeting minutes of June 18, 2020. Number C, SNC committee meeting, I'm sorry, number B, SNC Source Protection Authority meeting minutes of June 18th, 2020. Moved by Francois and seconded by Steve, that we do go forward and that we do approve these minutes. Is there any discussion or question? Hearing none, is there any objection? Hearing none, we've approved the Source Protection Authority meeting minutes of June 18th, 2020. They were in pages 15 to 17. Number C, SNC committee meeting highlights and minutes of 1, the Water Response Team meeting minutes of June 9th, pages 19 to 23. And number 2, the Water Response Team meeting minutes of July 23rd, 2020. And we won't be dealing with them now, but we did meet, as I mentioned earlier, on the 13th. And as I think Sandra mentioned, we have adapted elected, and the only area remaining from the 13th meeting in level 2 is the Upper South Nation area. The others have been approved and changed to level 1, and with the rain we've been getting recently, that will probably change when we meet the next time, the second Thursday in September, which I believe is about the 10th. So Sandra, before we call on that, I look for a mover and a seconder that these two sets of minutes be approved. So moved by Dana, seconded by Jerry. Sandra.
This is just an update. So in the July 9th, the water response team declared the level 1 for the low water for the Upper South Nation River South watershed. So in every meeting, we present the conditions. We update the team the conditions, and there is a discussion in what it will be the next steps. It's a very good team to work with, and we have representatives from the provincial government, municipalities, counties, farmers, and a golf course. And in July 23rd, they declare the level 2 for the full jurisdiction. And as Bill mentioned, the chair mentioned, the conditions are they improve, and they are constantly improving.
Are there any questions or comments on either of the two meetings, or the oral comment we gave you about the third meeting and when the next one is planned? And you will note as you're discussing the wide representation of people that is on that committee. Questions or comments? Hearing none, are there any objections to the approval? Hearing none, we have approved 5C, the committee meeting highlights and minutes of those two water response team meetings on the 9th and 23rd of July. Moving on to new business and 6A, request for approval, pandemic response. I'll hear from Angela first before I take a motion to approve. Angela.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My report this morning is on pages 30 through 37. And also, we have a few slides that we put in a separate deck too, just showing sort of the adaptability of some of the programs and services. Now, I'm not going to call on each of the team leads to do these. I will quickly run through them and just give you what I think are some high points before I give you my report. One example of the way, because I've been asked by many people, how do you think that the pandemic has impacted the business of the authority? How do you think that the authority is doing? And overall, I've been really pleasantly surprised with how easy we've been able to adapt to many of these things. So I'm just going to give a few examples. Earlier in the year, the City of Ottawa asked us, can you still deliver programs and services for us, special programs such as the ash tree replacement program? And I asked staff, do you think we'll have a lot of challenges? Do you think it's going to be something we can still do? Can we do it safely with the measures in place? And the way that we run our program and the way that it's very much online and easy for participants to send us photos of what's happening on their property has meant that we've really been able to seamlessly allow programs like this to continue. Next slide. And it may take a minute or two. Just staff working at home, doing all kinds of programs and services, and their ability to do so remotely, it kind of really, I'm not surprised. I think staff do a great job, but the way that they're able to just keep things going, communicate with the property owners, communicate with the residents, and still produce all kinds of materials for our website. This is just examples of what communications have produced during the low water conditions, and just showing how fast they're able to whip up things, even if they're working digitally and virtually. So this has been great. And I would say in a drought, we've probably handled, some of this work as seamlessly as any. And just for example, last week, I know we had a meeting. Our power was actually flickering off and on at the office. Our generator kicked in, and I know staff were able to keep going that way too. So if it's not one challenge, it's something else. So I think they've been adapting well. Next slide. They've also been adapting the programs and services. So if a community group, for example, is not hosting as many fishing derbies, other events on the river, the communications group, and I don't know if that's a combo of staff and the communications committee, have come up with great ways to support, for example, this fall fundraising art raffle. And so they adapt their programs and services to, still do something nice during the time of COVID. So I think it's just really great examples and good ways to engage local businesses as well. So I'm really pleased to see these initiatives. Next slide. Staff have still, throughout the whole thing, been going out and doing all kinds of inspections and assessments and maintenance on essential infrastructure. So the annual inspections on things like water control structures and the need for that to happen in a timely way so we can budget for them, all of those things have been happening as staff just go into the field and do the work that they're doing, thanks to the good work of the Health and Safety Committee with adequate social distancing and so forth. So a lot of this work just going on, business as usual. Next slide. Supporting the municipalities, though, as well. As staff receive inquiries from municipalities and partners, we still are going out, taking our equipment out, doing the assessments we always do in the field, and like we said, just doing that with appropriate distancing. So still very, very happy with these types of services and how they're happening. Next slide. And then we have huge amounts of information technically that are gathered and streamed over digital platforms. So things like this volunteer precipitation network has really allowed the technical staff to do amazing work. And I'm going to show a few other technical products that we have that really, staff living in areas with good internet connection have really seamlessly been able to do this work with no problems at all. So I'm really proud of the work that they've been able to do. Next slide. Water budgets, literature reviews, all the work of the authority still happening. We're meeting with other conservation authorities as well within the City of Ottawa to talk about how we can be more robust in our network and working together for flood forecasting and warning in those areas. So really happy that this is an example of work that Sandra's team in engineering is doing, but really, sort of business as usual. Next slide. And then John has a number of slides showing the visitation at conservation areas in June and July. And John, do you want to make any comments in general about the parks? Because I know we have had some extra work and with respect to, some vandalism, some public not respecting the spaces, but can I call on you to make any comment there?
Sure, and if we flip to the next slide, just for context too, I mean, obviously we're seeing lots of increased visitation. We're seeing double, triple our regular numbers in some of our parks, areas like Tweed, Burton, Jessop's Falls, High Falls, record numbers, lots of visitors through the door. And of course, with all those extra people, like Angela mentioned, comes extra work. So definitely our team has had to schedule lots of additional projects, whether it is to repair our trails or deal with hazard trees. There certainly is more work than ever in our parks, but I think the added benefit is it really is one of those most valuable natural assets that we have in our watershed, and the people have really, really appreciated that they've been open and maintained. And if you go to the next slide, Carl, just to show the July stats, and again to the next slide to show the difference over years. I mean, typically we're looking at around 100,000 people using our parks in a year with our counters. We've already reached 100,000 people, as of last month. So certainly lots of people through the door. And I mean, stats aren't everything either, right? We don't have trail counters at all of our parks or at all of our entrances, but it gives us a really good snapshot of the use and of course of the importance of this work as well. So it's contributed to extra maintenance, it's contributed to additional funding applications, and of course in the future upgrade projects that we'll be working on. Thank you.
So with that, Mr. Chair, it's the end of the slideshow. I'll briefly run through the report, but not make too many additional comments, as most of the comments are well summarized within the report. You do know we're in what they're calling stage 3, and that means that most of all businesses in public space are permitted to reopen. I did want to mention, though, that and add to the report, just so that we're always making the right decisions, some of the provincial guidance in there. So on page 31, for example, at the top, you know, the measures that are listed there are certainly important measures that we remain mindful of as we make the decisions that we make. Receiving some feedback, Carl. Is there anything we can do to maybe mute a few lines just so that it can be nice and clear? So I wanted to, say that we are still allowing staff to work remotely where that's effective. We are doing additional sanitization, cleaning, and safety measures within the office. We have not reopened the office to the public as of yet. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is the necessity to wear masking if we are open to the general public. So all staff would have to be masked in areas that are open to the public, and our office space is not necessarily well suited to closing off different areas. So we're mindful of that as we move forward. We have not received complaints with respect to people being able to access our programs and services. As I mentioned, site visits are and always have been available throughout the program, and that includes septic site visits and inspections, regulation site visit and inspection, as well as meetings for pre-consultation for development proposals, etc. So we've been doing fairly well with that. My discussions with the health unit, lead me to believe that there is, a need to do some of these things cautiously. I've outlined what the protocol is for staff in terms of if they're not feeling well. And then I've also mentioned in our operations how those things have been impacted. I did want to take a minute or two to touch briefly on financial applications, financial implications, and just to let you know of some of the items with respect to financial implications that are summarized on page number 34. As we've known throughout, it's been important to keep effective and up-to-date tracking of records, and we do think we can deliver a status quo budget in 2020. We do think we can deliver the budget as budgeted, and where some things have been shorter, I mean in terms of funding, I mean lower levels of funding, we've been able to offset a lot of those things with respect to other subsidies and fundings that have been available. So we continue to work towards that as we begin preparation for the 2021 budget. With that, I want to thank the board for their support of staff throughout this process. And I also want to draw your attention to the summary of report of impacts of COVID-19 that's from Conservation Ontario, attached to your board package on pages 35 through page number 37. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank staff for their continued good work and cooperation throughout this challenging time. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will entertain any questions, and if you want to ask the main question.
Before we entertain questions, I see that Danielle Lafleur wishes to move it, and Archie Mellon wishes to second it, if that's okay. And now we're open to questions or comments. It's a very thorough report, and a report that I'm pleased to see, and it follows through in what I think most of us believe, that we have an excellent staff and excellent programs being conducted, even under these difficult circumstances.
Bill, it's Doug Thompson here. I just want to thank you for that, Angela. It's the staff have been just incredible. And I know I've had a couple calls for staff to look at issues in and around Greeley, and they have been very helpful and cooperative to residents. And it also, I know the board has been very supportive during this time, but I think as well, Bill, our chair, he's really, I think he's really tied us all together over this last 2 or 3 months, or 3 months, or 4 months. So I think kudos to Chair Bill as well.
Thank you much. Further comments, questions, reaction?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's Steve Densham.
Steve.
Yeah, again, I just want to commend staff for the great work. Sometimes challenges bring out the best of creativity in individuals, and clearly I think we've seen that through staff as well. And I appreciate the financial view that you built, Angela, there, and it looks like we're trying to do our very best to control the costs. At the municipal level, we've actually received notification from Steve Clark of funding to help us continue to, adapt and provide services throughout COVID. And I don't know whether or not you've heard anything on your side, Angela, or whether we've heard anything about potential funding for the conservation. And if so, we've had to quantify what the costs have been, and we'll have to continue to measure it. And I wonder if you could comment a little bit on, have we, if we were provided funding, would we be in a position to comment, what sort of costs this has brought to the conservation authority, despite your great job at sort of balancing that off with other funding and creative ways of becoming more efficient? And would we be in a position to, accept that funding and potentially apply for others?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a couple of things on the funding side that we are looking at. There's some federal programming opening. We are not expecting a lot coming from the province directly to specifically to conservation authorities. Now, there may be money through the Trillium grant, the Trillium funds that are available, et cetera, that may help with some things. But our main focus right now will be on infrastructure adaptation, up into including additional floodplain mapping projects that we will be looking to the federal government through the monies that they have set aside. There's some important work that we can do to help both the federal and provincial governments meet their target priorities with respect to job creation, with respect to assuring flood and hazard and erosion control are taken care of. Those are specifically things the feds have funded in the past. For example, what we called the National Disaster Mitigation Program, where that was helping with our floodplain mapping projects. Now that program, as I understand it, has not been continued. However, flood and erosion control has been identified as one of the federal priorities that they're going to fund through the larger fund they have available. The other thing that's going to be important is infrastructure upgrades for things like parks and trails, and I think that's the same for municipalities as well, particularly where municipalities aren't faced with huge transit and other healthcare type of budget pressures. So I think it's important to look at the infrastructure and as well to look at the different programs that we have delivered well in the past for the feds. Can we quantify our work? Yes, we've set up separate budget tracking codes so that we can quantify specifically what is being spent for COVID and how that is being spent. So, in many ways it balances, but in other ways we know it's very important to have a solid financial tracking and background when we're asked those questions. So we do have that well set up in the financial department since the beginning of the pandemic outbreak.
Supplementary, Steve?
No, thank you. That's fantastic. Very proactive as usual. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you. Archie, I note you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I want to echo the two previous speakers on the job the staff has done to keep permits and approvals and everything else running smoothly. A couple questions, Angela. I wonder, you mentioned earlier about the fundraising raffle for paintings, I think it was. Are you going to be reaching out to local municipalities? I'm sure as every municipality or city has some very talented artists that may be interested in in looking at or working with South Nation on those projects?
I'm gonna say yes, and if John wants to add anything else, he can, but I'm gonna just say yes, we will.
Thank you.
Certainly. The answer is yes. We already have 10 artists actually secured for the fundraiser, but we're definitely looking to do some additional outreach in the upcoming weeks to host a good fall fundraiser.
Thank you. And one more, if you will, Mr. Chair. You had mentioned our offices aren't open yet. Now, some people that may have problems with doing virtual, if you will, computer, and whatnot. Can they make appointments to meet with staff at the office privately, or is the office completely closed to the public?
No, we can facilitate access. We just have a controlled area. Just like I said, we're trying to do the reintegration of staff as successfully as possible. So it was to get staff in and get the comfort level with there's a lot with additional cleaning and all about those things, and then to segregate an area so that when the public comes in, it's one area, and that's really important. And I know you probably know this from your own municipalities. Some of the municipal offices are really well set up to have the general public in, and others where the foyers and the lobbies and such are more open or a bit more challenging. So we do have also, Archie, I will say, like a drop box by the front door. So we do have a physical drop box as well. And I think that the other thing is we've been facilitating online payments to the greatest extent possible as well, knowing that that's important. We also toyed with, because while our office is not actually super well set up for the foyer, we are well set up for almost to have a drive-through situation where people could come and do their payments and drop their paperwork that way if that worked better. So we're just between two things. We kind of want to watch how the back to school goes. We do want to watch a little bit if there is outbreaks, and if all that's controlled, I'm a little bit more easy to open the office. But in some of my health unit calls, it led me to believe that it's very important that you have very solid contact tracing, and making sure that all the guests you have into your office, you can really track them down if for one reason or another. It's cuts both ways, right? We want to protect staff from too many people coming into the office, and we want to protect visitors from the fact that we have a pretty good number of staff coming in and out of the office. So it's all about balancing that and making sure that once everybody goes back to school, we don't have any challenges with that, because we were a very open shop. We facilitate community groups coming in and out of here at night, and at any given night we might have had 3 outside community meetings in here. So simply right now, for us to open up the back part of the office is not simple for us, because you have to know who's coming in and out of your building if someone has a need to be contacted by the health unit. And then in the office, we just want to make sure that the masking, we can have a safe area for people to come in for appointments, and appointments work a little better because it's a little easier to do the contact tracing. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Angela, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I see no further hands or questions at the moment. Do I have missed any? Then the comment I would have at the end of this before we vote on it is that I was really interested in looking at the review of how the CAs across Ontario dealt with the pandemic and the problems they faced. And I thought when I compared our CA with theirs, I was quite pleased with the results. So thank you again to the staff, etc. Then the SNC Board of Directors received the pandemic response report for approval, duly moved and seconded by let me think, it's Archie and
Mr. Chair, Mike Brown.
Michael. Okay, Daniel and Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
That's all, Mr. Chair. I'm very supportive of it.
Okay, thank you very much. Then duly moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we've approved the item 6A. Moving on to 6B. Request for approval 2020 annual general meeting. Angela, page 38.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report is simply an updated report. Whenever we first had to postpone our annual general meeting, we did so from Thursday, March 19th in compliance with the public health recommendations. Since that time, a number of municipalities and others have opened up their offices for at least the council or the boards to meet. I do think within the boardroom that we have, and given we're simply 13 members, that we can safely accommodate everyone with appropriate social distancing for a September meeting. As the question was originally posed, we will make accommodation for any board member so requesting that feels that it would be more appropriate for them to attend virtually for any number of reasons. The reason I put it in here is that we do plan that we would have the elections for the AGM and simply adopt the business that we'd already, you'll recall that we already adopted, we had the auditor's presentation online and we had a number of things happened online. So we would simply, in a report, adopt the business previously conducted and host the election on September 17th of 2020. I did look into a number of different organizations, and it seems that this seems an appropriate way to do that. So I'll look for any comments, questions.
Before we do that, I will go have it duly moved by Pierre and seconded by Michael. If I think that would be okay, and I want to add that I think that now is the time to move forward, as I discussed with each of you when I had the opportunity to speak with you over the last few days. I also think that if there's a major problem evolves as school opens and as we get closer to September, we can make changes right to the last minute. But at the moment, this is, I think, the best direction to go, and I think I had your support. Open to questions, comments.
Mr. Chair, may I make one quick before? Just to let you know that public attendance would still be virtual, however, just like the council meetings.
And also staff.
Yes, the majority
with
of
very
staff
few
as
exceptions.
Well.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Michael Brown, I'm very supportive of this. My feeling is that, as it were, we should strike while the iron is hot. I think that I am, of course, sensitive to the fact that there are members of the board who are perhaps arguably more susceptible to the COVID virus. I think if we can observe physical distancing, masking, I will wear a face shield, frankly, as well as my mask. I think that these things can be done in a way that the meeting can be held safely, but I also respect the fact that many of us are, quote unquote, waiting for the other shoe to drop in terms of a second wave or a spike or a surge somehow associated with the return to school. And so I agree, we have to just keep cognizant of those aspects, but I still think we should aim and resolve to have the election in September. I think that is appropriate, responsible, and it's time.
Thank you, Michael. Further comments, observations?
Mr. Chair, I have Archie.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with what Michael's comments, and I think you've answered my question. The meeting, the AGM meeting on September will be live streamed virtually for the public to observe or watch, because I've had a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people like watching council meetings, I guess, over the computer. You know, they can tune in, tune out, and they can tune us out. So, but yeah, so it's, I think as long as we can continue to live stream it to the public, we can just limit it to the board of directors and the necessary staff that'll be there, the 2 or 3, whatever. Okay, that's all, Mr. Chair.
Further questions, comments, observations? Hearing none, the SNC Board of Directors approved the annual general meeting date of September 17th, 2020, and it would be 9 in the morning, and duly moved and seconded. Hearing no further discussion, is there any objection? Carried. All right, we're moving on to item C. Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, board members. report is on page 39, and this is the 2021 levy and budget schedule. Every year we bring this to the board in August to lay out our plans on the levy approval in October, with the budget first draft in November. And then, of course, if we need a December meeting for a second draft of the 2021 budget. We normally receive, and we have always received, I should say, the MNRF assessment data for the levy calculation in September. So that gives us a little bit of time to review that assessment and that data and provide the levy report in October. Thank you.
So the recommendation is the SNC Board of Directors approve the 2021 levy and budget schedule as presented. And I observe that Steve Denshin moves and Daniel Lafleur seconds this motion. Is there any discussion, comment, reaction?
Mr. Chair, it's Archie Mellon again. I guess, Linda, we'll have most of the numbers, or you'll have most of the numbers as we've been tracking any impact financially the COVID situation has caused. You'll have adequate numbers to propose a levy on the October meeting?
Yes, our tracking system for forecasting and our operational expenses, we review that monthly, and we bring that to the board every month with the update of the operating statement. So we'll continue that process right through to the budget meeting in November.
Okay.
Further questions or comments? Thanks, Archie.
Mr. Chair, I can make one quick one. Just in terms of how we do the budget, Linda and I have discussed a little bit about that. There may be some areas that are challenging because, for example, even if we put something like board member per diems, our budget is usually forecasted over actuals. So, where we've had basically a very, very, spend out of maybe 20% or 25% on some line items, year over year comparisons in this budget may look a little bit different than they normally do. So just, nothing major. We're going to try our best, but just remain mindful of that fact is that, where committees haven't met, where mileage has been different than it would normally be, things like courses and things like that. There may be some variance in those lines and possibly more variance showing than there sometimes would be. And then keeping in mind on the other side, where it's something like health and safety or equipment and such, there may be overruns in those areas. So I just ask you to remain mindful of that, just because our budget is based on actuals and we are running those actuals monthly. So just to file for your information that there's going to be plus in some areas and minus in other areas. And as we're forecasting right now, those are balancing out, but just on the line by lines as we go ahead, that's something we've already discussed. We'll show some variance.
Any further questions or comments on the report and or the comments or reactions that have been presented? Hearing, seeing none, duly moved and seconded by Steve and Danielle that we approve, and I read it already, so are there any objections? Hearing none, we have approved. The Board of Directors approved the 2021 levy and budget schedule as presented. So we're moving on to number 6D. John, pages 40 and 41.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few grant applications have been submitted since our last meeting. As you know, we work through them as they come out, and we do our best to tag them onto existing projects or improvements that we need in our natural spaces. So we have submitted 3 recent applications since our last meeting. That is for the Enabling Accessibility Fund. That's a small fund projects where we applied for some funding to upgrade some washroom facilities in our parks. We've also applied for a funding submission to Unsmoke Canada for some community cleanup activities, primarily in Finley Creek and Leitrim Wetland. We've also applied to the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation for some support for additional signage at W.E. Burden, especially in light of the increased interest at that site. At this point, we have received approval on the funding for the cleanups, And if it doesn't take place this fall, we have approval to move that money into next year. And we have tentative approval from TD Friends of the Environment as well. So some good success since our last meeting, and we hope to bring some more to you for approval at our next meeting. Thank you.
This motion, the SNC Board of Directors approve the submission of the following applications, and they're listed on your screen, and it's duly moved by, jeepers, I had it a minute ago, duly moved by Dana and seconded by Doug, that we approve. Hearing no objection, are there any objections? Hearing none, this item is approved. Request for approval, Hazard Land Acquisition Reserve. Angela, 6E.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This report we'd postponed from last month to get a little bit of additional information based on a question that we had. You'll recall that the special working group of board members have been meeting to discuss the hazard lands from Castleman to Lemieux. For those members of the public listening, this is the area where the 1993 retrogressive landslide occurred. Luckily in 93 there was no loss of life. However, over time, the Conservation Authority was responsible in the early 1990s, as well at that time as all levels of government. They supported a number of acquisitions, a total in 28 along the stretch of river from Castleman to Lemieux. At that time, those costs were about $2.2 million to buy out those 28 homes. And in fact, the purchase of those homes resulted in certainly, the successful result that we had in the 1993 landslide where no lives were lost. The committee that we had a number of discussions, and we budgeted as a board in 2020 budget $25,000 from our general levy towards a hazard land acquisition reserve. So it is in budget. You know that we already have a land acquisition reserve for forestry and tree planting, for forested lands, and that is a special levy to the municipalities. With the discussion of core mandate that was coming out of the province, as well as our own discussions as a board, I think it is appropriate, even though $25,000 is not a lot of money, hopefully with other levels of government as well as local levels of government committing and supporting the acquisition of hazard lands within the Castleman to Lemieux area, we can over time, and that's not all going to happen in 1 year, but we can over time reduce the risk of loss of life within that area should a potential retrogressive landslide occur. Approximately right now, there are 27 residences that still exist within the potential retrogressive landslide area. There's many, many lands there, but our focus at this time always remains the protection of loss of life as respect to simply loss of property. So my recommendation in this report is simply that we take the budgeted funds and move them into the hazard land acquisition reserve. And again, my hope with doing this is that it's a proactive approach that shows that the Conservation Authority is committed to, in working with its partners, reduce the risk of loss of life due to the hazard lands within that particular area. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that we've had a number of discussions, and we think that this is a proactive and appropriate approach to take. Would we do this every year? Now that we are facing budget pressures such as COVID, I think it's important that we look at what we think is an appropriate allocation during budget time and put that to each individual board. As I mentioned, our budget is a policy document, not an implementation document. So we have the 25,000 there. And like I said, I'm seeking the approval right now to move that to what we would call the hazard land acquisition reserve. And we also have some other monies available for hazard land acquisition. In closed session, we'll have some additional discussion about some properties we may be interested in. Questions or comments?
Before I do that, moved by George, seconded by Pierre, that we do approve the SNC Board of Directors allocating $25,000 from the 2020 budget to the Hazard Land Acquisition Reserve. And if I might add, the experts tell us it's not if there's another slide, it's when. We're in that area, and being proactive, I believe, is one of our responsibilities, and we've discussed it at various times over the last few years. So I think it's a good suggestion personally, a good recommendation personally. Other suggestions or comments? Seeing no hands or seeing nothing else, it was well explained. Thank you, Angela. We're ready for the question, and I've already read it. It's been duly moved and seconded. Are there any objectors? Hearing none, we have approved 6E. 6F, Sandra.
Good morning, Board of Directors. In January 2020, the Board of Directors approved to enter into a Memorandum of Understanding to complete the LAROS Forest Low Impact Development with the counties of Prescott and Russell. Under that MOU, South Nation was responsible for the coordination of phase one of the project, the procurement of professional services for field investigation and site design, and supporting external funding applications for the phase two. UCPR has requested that SNC retain the consultant to complete the design at full cost recovery to South Nation. This is a change of scope in the project and will require that the Memorandum of Understanding be amended. So to move forward with the request, SNC, following our purchasing policy, will request quotes, and it was posted in Bidingo on July 13th of 2020. The request included a site evaluation and soil testing of the two sites, the two parking lots, the topographical survey, detailed engineering and detailed engineering designs. So only two companies. We have a mandatory site visit on July 22nd, and only two companies attended that site visit, and both companies submitted quotes. You can see the table below. You have every quote by different tasks, and we are recommended to accept the lowest quote. That is 50,890.
So I'm going to read the recommendation and have the movers and seconders. Recommendation: the Board of Directors approve an amendment to the Memorandum of Understanding with the United Counties of Prescott and Russell to reflect the change in project deliverables at an approximated cost of $35,000 plus tax, and further that the Board of Directors approve entering into an agreement with Company A for the completion of the low impact development final design for the Rose Forest project at an approximate cost of $51,890 plus HST. And I think that I see Jerry Coutts moving, and Francois Saint-Amour seconding. Discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, are you ready for the question? Any objections? We have approved 6F. Moving on to 6G, Pat. A question. Did I hear a question? Okay, 6G.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reports on page 46, requesting approval for vehicle purchase and disposal. We do follow a replacement schedule for our vehicles, and we're currently seeking approval to replace a 2012 Mazda C3. The vehicle is 8 years old. The mileage is 224,000 kilometers, and we will keep that vehicle until the field season is over and dispose of it in the fall.
The recommendation is, thanks Pat, the recommendation is the SNC Board of Directors approve the purchase of a crossover type vehicle at an upset limit of 30,000 plus HST, and further that the Board of Directors approve disposal of the surplus vehicle. And I see moved by Archie, seconded by Peggy. Open to discussion, questions, and comments. Hearing no others, Pat, when the vehicle is disposed of, the dollars go back into the what fund do they go into?
They go back into the general reserves.
Thank you.
General budget.
Is there any other question or comment?
Mr. Chair, just a comment, I guess, right now. We don't have a fleet reserve, I guess, allocation. We don't have it in our budget. Is that something we should be looking at for future, to keep us on top of fleet replacements?
I can answer that question, Mr. Chair. It's Linda. Every year we've budgeted for a vehicle replacement based on the schedule. So each year we do have dollars in the budget as coming from the general levy or the general fund. We don't have a specific reserve for vehicle replacement because we do this on an annual basis. With the number that are in our fleet, it works out that we are pretty much doing one vehicle a year. So we don't have a year where we may replace 5 vehicles at once, which would cause us some pressure to do that. So we're on a schedule where we do a vehicle a year.
Supplementary, Archie?
No, I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Linda. Bye.
Further comments, questions, suggestions? Hearing none. It's already been duly read into the record and duly moved and seconded. Is there any objection to 6G? Hearing none, we've approved. 6H, Carl.
Good morning, members of the board. This report is an update ahead of a future report regarding our HVAC system. There are currently 6 rooftop units on the roof at the Finch office, and those were installed along with the ductwork as part of the 2008 office renovation. The amount billed for HVAC at that time was $114,000, although there may have been additional engineering and design costs, just to give you an idea of the overall cost of that system. The RTUs or rooftop units are serviced twice per year, including a filter change. At present, there's mixed guidance from public health departments regarding air circulation, ventilation, and healthy workspaces, and what exactly is a best practice. So SNC is seeking advice from a company specializing in testing HVAC systems, and we're seeking to bring a report back to you in September with any recommendations arising from those tests.
And so reading it in, the Board of Directors receive and file the HVAC system review report, and it's been duly moved and seconded by Peggy, moving, Pierre, seconding. Questions or comments, suggestions? Hearing none. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we have approved 6H. 6I, update county planning study. Allison, page 48.
Good morning, board members. We wanted to give you a quick update on our county planning study. This is the study that we're looking after for UCPR and SD&G. In conversations with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, we've discovered that this is actually the first time that 2 counties have come together, especially with a CA, but even just having 2 counties come together to work on a big study like this, it's actually considered a unique example of collaboration and efficiency. We were asked to present to the Eastern Region Planners Conference on this partnership, but unfortunately it was canceled due to COVID. So this project is really exciting. It's allowing us to have a lot of conversations with municipalities about our watershed, our natural landscape, but also our policies in development and what works and doesn't work. We've had great conversations that have led us down some interesting paths as to how we could better protect wetlands and forests and UCPR, and also how we could develop some tools for municipalities that they've been asking for years to make small development review easier. We're very excited that we have a draft natural heritage system ready at a staff level. We're reviewing it internally. We've had quite a few meetings with county planners and local planners to talk about the policies surrounding these areas, and we're gearing up and getting ready for a nice consultation in the fall with the public. We're very excited for that. We're excited to hear from people about how they interact with sort of these natural heritage features in their own lives, and those are things like woodlands and wetlands and rivers. So it's been an exciting project, and we've all learned a lot from working on it, and we're looking forward to kind of finishing up the last few phases this fall and winter with a deliverable back to both counties in late winter 2021.
So the recommendation is the SNC Board of Directors receive and file the county planning study update. And I observe that Steve Dengen moves, and it's seconded by Jerry. Is there any question, discussion, comment, either to add to or of Allison? Hearing none. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we have approved 6I. 6J, we're going to Allison.
So this will be a series of 3 subsequent, 2 updates and 1 approval. So what we're doing is adding a monthly summary of the septic permits issued. You'll remember we're doing that already for planning and regulations. So you'll see here the permits that were issued in July, listing the numbers, the sequential number of permits, landowner name, and the former municipality, which is how we file. So this shows a busy month in July, and at the end of the year, we'll do a nice summary of all the permits issued, but I think we're at about double our normal number of permits in the septic department.
So the recommendation is the SNC Board of Directors receive and file the list of permits issued under Part 8 of the Ontario Building Code on-site sewage systems. Moved by George, seconded by Dana. Questions or comments? Observing none. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we've approved 6J. 6K, and we're going to Allison.
So this is our planning activity summary. This is for 2 months, June and July. You'll also see the list of technical reviews, which are on page 54. You can see we were busy in our stormwater and environmental impact statement reviews. And you'll also see a number of severances, land division. In speaking with local municipalities, most of our smaller municipalities are seeing about double in their development departments as well. So it's been a busy summer. People have fit vacation in, but barely.
So it's a pretty thorough report. You can see that there's been a lot of action. The SNC Board of Directors receive and file the planning activity update, and it's moved by Doug, seconded by Pierre. Are there any questions, suggestions, comments? Hearing none. Is there any objection? Hearing none. Approved. Going to 6, that's 6K approved. Going to 6L.
And so I'm delivering this report on behalf of Jeff today, who is legitimately trying to get a number of permits out. So we're going to let him do what he does best and work on those. So this is a request for approval for the regulations permits that were issued. The listing is there, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So the recommendation is the SNC Board of Directors approve permits 73 through 102 issued under Ontario Regulation 170.06 development, interference with wetlands and alterations to shorelines and watercourses. Duly moved and seconded by Danielle, moved and seconded by Peggy. Is there any question? Hearing none. Going to the question, duly moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing none, 6L is approved. Number 7, A, request for approval, monies received in disbursement register, pages 59 to 66. Carl.
Good morning, members of the board. This is the regular housekeeping update where we bring forward any money spent and monies received for the previous month. So you'll see, because of our break for the summer in terms of board meetings, this includes June and July.
So it's 7A, moved by Pierre, seconded by Francois. Is there any question or comment? Is there, ready for the question, duly moved and seconded? Are there any objections? We have approved 7. Number 8, supplemental agenda. Going to estimated statement of operations, and that has been given to you as a supplemental. Who's presenting that? Just a second. It's
It will be Linda.
It's Linda.
Linda. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, it's the only report on the supplemental agenda today. Every month we review our operating expenses and provide a forecast through the senior management team. So this update is up to July 31st, 2020. And at this point in time, we're estimating a small surplus at $51,000. And I think you heard some of the financial implications in a previous report around the COVID and maybe some savings that we're experiencing via all the virtual meetings that are being held and savings in the travel and accommodations and things that we may go on site to Toronto for Conservation Ontario and those types of meetings, external meetings. So taking that into consideration, along with some of the revenues, new revenues that we have received, and some maybe slight reductions in some other areas. Also, a big part of our budget and our actuals every year is the staffing component. And every year we have staff that come and go, and that's taken into consideration when we do our forecast. So at this point in time, this surplus is estimated at $51,000. And be assured that every month from September through October into November's budget, we update that forecast as we experience changes or review all of the line items within the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So the recommendation is the Board of Directors receive and file the estimated statement of operations for the year ending December 31st, 2020, as of July 31st, 2020 update. And moved by Michael, seconded by Steve, that we do approve. Open to questions, comments, reaction.
Mr. Chair, Steve Dencham. Just a quick question. The supplemental is 2 pages if I look at it through the portal, but it implies that there should be a page 3 and 4.
Yes, I think, Steve, that has to do with the public portal not having the full agenda. And I think that'll get posted, but the members portal does have the full sub-agenda.
Okay. So
I did notice that myself early this morning.
Okay. So I need to go through the members portal.
Yes.
Okay, my mistake. Thank you.
Good question, Steve. Is there any other question, comment? Hearing none, duly moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we have approved the supplemental agenda as presented by Linda. Correspondence, there are letters. Can I turn this to you, Angela, quickly?
Sure thing. So on page 67, we have a letter from Ministry of Natural Resources, John Yakubuski, thanking us for our work with the client service and streamlining initiatives. We are I'm part of a provincial committee, and so is Allison, on streamlining and making development applications more seamless with respect to Conservation Authority reviews. And this is letting everyone know that, you know, the initiative has gone well. There's, I think, 3 or 4 general managers and a few staff. So they have limited that to what they're calling the high growth conservation areas. And our location in Ontario is identified as a high growth conservation area. So we are part of that. That's just a letter from Yakabuski thanking for that initiative. Correspondence number 2 on page 68 is just letting the municipalities and board members via this know that there's a number of changes happening with respect to environmental assessment and modernization. I think that the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks through Minister Urek is looking at streamlining many things. But if municipalities have concerns or questions, I think it's a good time to have a look. And I know that certainly some of the larger conservation authorities near and around the GTA have asked a number of questions with respect to streamlining and the processes being taken currently. For us, we're just making comments with respect to stormwater approvals and streamlining of those reviews. Not all bad things, but I think something we need to be mindful of. On page 72, I've included a council resolution that came from the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. It was sort of follow-up from the ministerial consultations on conservation authorities, and I think it's worth a read, and if anyone feels so inclined, those resolutions to the province, I think, are always appreciated by the conservation authorities. So that is what the United Counties of Leeds Grenville sent up. Some lower tier municipalities have sent positive resolutions, and a number of those came in, but just so you know, that's a recent one. It got set on the back burner during the time of COVID, and they just approved that one in July. And then you've got on finally pages 73 and 74 a letter from Mississippi Valley seeking additional support from Minister Yakabuski with respect to flood infrastructure and other capital projects within their watershed. I do understand from Sally McIntyre, General Manager over at MVCA, that they do have an upcoming meeting with Minister Yakabuski. Certainly questions there with respect to if the province can provide any additional support. These initiatives have happened a number of times. But Mississippi's reaching out again. Mississippi's in a unique situation, extensive flooding in 2017, 2019, and a lot of flood control infrastructure that's very old infrastructure. So they really do need some additional support to help pay for that infrastructure. So those are the letters.
Questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's Steve Duncham. And maybe this sort of started crossing my mind when Angela was presenting the pandemic report, as well as we know that right now many of the municipalities, especially in the rural areas in SDNG, are very much looking forward to investments in internet and mobility servicing upgrades. And with all the correspondence, that kind of came to mind as well. And I don't know whether or not SNC has taken any time to really reflect on how upgraded infrastructure for both internet and mobility could allow us to do our business better, especially in the rural areas, and whether or not a letter from the board in support of the work that's going on by the Eastern Ontario Regional Network would be warranted.
I'll leave that to the board members if they like that idea. I do think it's important. I know the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus has been championing for advanced infrastructure for a while, and now I understand that the Western Wardens Caucus is doing some of that as well. It's certainly, you know, it's certainly very, very important, and you know, I can speak as someone that, you know, really came to the office very often because just the internet and cell phone service in my area is questionable. So I think it's worthwhile to say that that kind of support is important for everything from flood forecasting to mobile workforce to job creation in our area. So I'm supportive of it, and I'll look to the board for if that's a direction they want to give staff.
I think especially since you know, COVID is kind of shifting the paradigm, and we have no idea how permanent this is likely to be. And so many of the municipalities are kind of striking while the iron is hot, even just there, so that we can get as much support as possible and as many eyes as possible on this this topic.
So, Steve, are you making a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we send a letter of support for the from the SNC to support the expansion of internet and mobility in our region.
Bill, Doug Thompson, I'll second that.
Doug Thompson seconds, okay. Okay, discussion.
Mr. Chair, Pierre Leroux here.
Yes, Pierre.
I actually sit on the EORN board, so a letter of support is most welcome. Just to let you know that we have had very positive discussions with the province and the feds as well during the AMO conference. So EORN has a very ambitious project, you know, over $1.3 billion. But discussions are advancing in the right direction, and hopefully we can get firm commitments from the province and the feds sooner than later. But everybody is well aware of the shortcomings of current infrastructure, so I'm glad to hear that support is much appreciated.
So if and when we approve this, a letter will be drafted by South Nation that I will forward to the appropriate places with copies. Is that correct, Angela?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Is there further discussion?
Mr. Chair, it's Archie Mellon. Yeah, I would like to also endorse this. Pierre's already alluded to. There's quite a large undertaking, and with a three-way partnership, I guess it would be. So any type of endorsement from all levels that affect that are affected by the rural lack of rural internet and cell phone coverage, I think, is more than welcome. So yeah, I think this is definitely something that is worthwhile to support.
Further comments? Duly moved and seconded that we do forward a letter, and it's been read into the report. Any objections? Hearing none, approved. So the letter will be written and sent off as soon as possible, and I will sign it with copies to anyone that it's appropriate to send copies to. And I think that'll leave that to the staff to make that recommendation to me. Is there anything further on that topic? Hearing none. Going on to number 10. We've already discussed 10/17 about the meeting date. Is that meeting still a good date with the OMEC conference? Sometimes we have made a change in that so that it doesn't conflict. Comment?
So I understand, Mr. Chair, it is Angela speaking, that the OMEC conference has changed dates. And Diane, do you have the new dates for that? It's having to do with October, so I think it's near and around October 21st or 22nd. Can any council member help me out on that?
It's October 21st and October 22nd, Angela.
Okay, it is 21st and 22nd. So Ontario East Conference has been moved back until October. So strike that October 21st and 22nd is what I'm hearing are the new dates for Ontario East.
And that won't conflict since our October meeting is October the 15th.
That's correct.
Is there anything further on number 10, upcoming meetings? It's an information item then, duly noted. Are there any future motions of the board and or discussion of SNC issues to be stated under number 11? Hearing none, and if there are any come up, we will certainly add them as we go along and report them. We're ready to move into the closed session. So moved by Archie Mellon, seconded by Daniel Lafleur, that we move into closed session. Is there any further discussion or objection? Hearing no objections, we will so move into closed session, and you'll note that you have to go out of this and go back into the special address given. Is there any more information needed, Carl?
I was just going to propose, Mr. Chair, if I may, a short interlude in between the two to give everyone a chance to readjust.
Yes, yeah, that would be good.
I agree. I second that.
Darn, I was on a roll and I was thinking, okay, it's 10:44 by my little computer here, and that's 30 seconds different than Angela's. Let's say we try to be back in by 10:55. Does that make sense, or do you want to make it 11?
I think 10:55 is fine. That should give us time. I think that
Good.
should be okay.
So by 10:55, and we'll hope to be going by 11 in the closed session. Thank you very much then. We're finished this section. Thank you to staff for the input they've had, and we'll move out of this. We'll all get out and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thanks
Sorry,
so much.
Mr. Chair, you wanted board members in the closed session at what time? Did you say 10:55 or 11, just for clarification?
I want you to be in by 10:55 so we can be started by 11.
Okay, thank you.
So thanks a lot.
Just a reminder to any staff staying on the call that the live stream will continue. So feel free to, I've muted everyone, but feel free to kill your video feeds.
Is anyone still on this line?
I'm on, Angela.
Okay.
But I muted everyone else.
Okay, I'm going to go into the closed session, okay?
Okay.
Is that good?
Hi, Doug. If you're still in the open meeting, we're ready in the closed session. You need to log out of this call and go back into the closed meeting link.
And I've got everyone coming back. I'm seeing Danielle. Di, can you hear me and open? Yeah, Carl's. Okay. Danielle, Dana, got quite a few in. Doug. Bill in yet? Perfect. Great. Okay.
I'm back.
I've got George back. Do I have Steve Densham back? Yes to Steve Densham. Yes. Archie Mellon. Archie Mellon.
He's on, is muted.
Unmuted. Am I here? I'm back, I think.
Perfect. I see Peggy Taylor getting admitted. George Giroux said he was on. Pierre Leroux. Pierre, I see. I'm here. I see you there. I see Danielle. Did Francois make it back? Jerry Couts.
Yep.
Yes, I'm here.
Chair Smurl's back.
I haven't seen him yet.
Okay. Michael Brown.
Bill is back. Chair Smurl is back. He's on mute though.
Thank you. Michael Brown. Did I get yes?
Not yet from Michael Brown.
Doug Thompson, yes.
Yes.
And Dana Farkashu.
I'm here, Angela.
Awesome, thank you. So Chair Smurl, we have enough folks back if we wish to reconvene. He may be muted.
He is. I can't unmute.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Awesome. Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, for some reason I muted, so I apologize. So Angela, we're moving to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we dealt with matters in closed session.
For direction.
For direction, and we have our resolution to come back into open session, moved by Jerry Couts, seconded by Pierre Leroux, that we move out of camera, and we all agreed to that. And the resolution coming out of closed session included item number 1, which was that recommendation that the board of directors approve the acquisition of property 1 to an upset limit as discussed, plus ancillary costs. So do I have a mover and seconder for that resolution?
Doug Thompson.
Doug Thompson moves.
Seconded by Francois.
So duly moved and seconded.
Okay, there's a couple parts to that. The second part is that the board of directors approve negotiations of property 2. Staff entering into negotiations on property 2.
Moved by Francois.
And that was with the report back in the September meeting.
Yes, right. That's correct, Mr. Chair. And that's seconded by
Danielle Lafleur.
Danielle Lafleur, thank you.
So duly moved and seconded. We're dealing with both questions at once? No.
We can put that either, we can do it as one resolution or 2, but let's separate it because it is dealing with 2 different properties.
I agree.
Okay, so the first one, do you want me to reread it, Mr. Chair, and say who the mover and seconder is?
Yes, please.
Okay, so recommendation 1 is that the Board of Directors approve the acquisition of property 1 to an upset limit as discussed, plus ancillary costs, and further that the Board of Directors approve the transfer of reserve funds to acquire the subject land. That one was moved by Doug Thompson and seconded by Francois Saint-Amour.
Is there any further discussion? You ready for the question? Are there any objectors?
I object, Mr. Chair, Archie Mellon.
Are there any other objectors? Then I declare it approved with, but not unanimously.
Okay.
Second item.
Second resolution that the Board of Directors approve negotiations of property 2. Moved by Francois Saint-Amour, seconded by Danielle Lafleur, with a report to be brought back in September 2020.
Any further discussion? Then the motion's been duly moved and seconded, and we're looking for anything else to be added? Hearing nothing. Are there objections? Hearing no objections, it's approved as put forth. Angela, is there anything further for the meeting today?
No, there is not, Mr. Chair.
Then thank you everyone very, very much for being with us and being as involved as you were. And I believe I have a motion by Dana, seconded by Francois, that we do adjourn. Objections?
No. See you in September.
Yes, and we're adjourned.